What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. And look who we decided to just grab during the dog days of summer. Never a dog, the good type of dog that of course, our guy Jovan Alford at Jovan 10. I mean, he's all over the place. Content producer, Sporting News, and now the newest version. I got to plug this baby up. What is this? FTN Bets doing a little content for them and posting your stuff. You still got the pod as well, so you're all over the place. Totalsportslive.com. Good to talk to you, my friend. I feel as though when we talked to you, it was snowing outside. Now we got, the dog days of summer. We got baseball. NBA finals are done. Wait to see what the bearded one does any moment for the Sixers. And then we turn around and it's NFL time. But always good to catch up, pal.
Hey, same man. It's so funny that we're doing this pod, and literally, like you said, the bearded one news breaks right before we do it. So it must be a sign, right?
Listen, it always works like that. So let's get into it. So this is really nothing new, right? So I, I'm surprised, but for the viewing audience, Sixers, James Harden is picking up his 35.6 million option. Sides are beginning to work together and exploring trade scenarios. It's expected he played his last game in Philly. I mean, I could have told you this a month ago. I saw this, the handwriting on the wall. He had another piss poor performance in the playoffs. He had one moment here and there. The comments wouldn't be Doc gets fired. Doc has a couple comments. They asked James, what's it like playing with Doc? Do you have any issues? And, silence is golden, is it not? I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. You do something wrong to your significant other. It's not like they scream. They're not shouting. They just turn around and they're silent. And they just give you that's the worst. You never want the silent treatment. That's bad juju. You're done. The relationship's over. So I feel it's the same thing with Doc, 76ers, and now James Harden. And quite frankly, Jovan, look, man, I don't think they were going to make it fit, and I don't think they were going to win with that tandem of James Harden and Embiid. So as we learn, this news comes down about 20 or so minutes. What's your thoughts?
I mean, like you said, it's kind of not surprising just based off of just like you said, what Doc said, about coaching hard, and even just how it unceremoniously ended in game 7, right? In the most pressure packed moment where your season's on the line. It was your role players and supporting cast who stood up, and your two superstars that didn't. And James Harden was the main culprit in that story. We heard, throughout the season that, the little rumblings about Houston and maybe he'll go to Houston now. Obviously, those rumblings aren't happening no more because Houston have their eyes on other players. But again, it was just always hearing the rumors of he's looking somewhere else or he could go somewhere else. So him obviously picking up the option because he's not going to turn down that money. Most players don't, if they know they're probably going somewhere else. All right, they're not going to turn down that money. And now it's up to Daryl Morey again. This is now putting Daryl Morey into the GM chair. Are you a good GM to get back some valuable pieces that you flipped Harden, you got Harden for Simmons and Seth Curry and Drummond, which, on the surface, you say the Sixers won that trade because Simmons hasn't been, haven't played much, and Curry, kind of went down a little bit in Brooklyn. Now, what can you do for James? Now, what can you get for James Harden? What kind of pieces can you get back to keep this team at least a contender in Eastern Conference? I can't even say a final contender, a contender in the conference that's just going to get better.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you bring up too, because I was thinking about this. He gave them their discount, did he not? So
Yeah.
so he wasn't going
Mm-hmm.
to um, do anything more. I mean, if you were looking at 3 at 135, and then again, no guarantee on that third year. Who knows? It's just these guys want to make the money when they want to make the money, and I just think if a team's dumb enough to pay him what he wants, then you're stuck with him. But as you mentioned, now it's, can we maybe find a trade partner, and what can we get back in return?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the key for Morey, right? We're already, hearing rumors that the Clippers are interested. I even saw the Knicks thrown out there. The team that's interested don't know what the Knicks have that the Sixers could want, and don't know how that legit works. But yeah, if you're more, you got to find some way to get back a all-star star caliber player, because you get rid of James Harden. Obviously, you're still left with Tyrese Maxey, who's a rising star in the league, but now you're also dealing now with the window of Joel Embiid and his, title chance window. It's every year he plays, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter just because a big man, even though Jokic was able to do it, right? It's so hard to win a title with a big man, or at least even be in that conversation to be competitive. So if you're Morey, and a lot of Sixers fans, including myself, have given him a lot of hell for things that he hasn't been able to do as a GM, this is going to be his time to see if he can get this team right with someone who was his guy in heart, and sending him where he wants to go, but also doing the right thing for the Sixers and getting them the pieces that they need to be a contender in the Eastern Conference.
Which, quite frankly, I don't think they are. And I don't
No.
think they are going to be anymore. I mean, you still got to go through Milwaukee, and they're dealing with Chris Middleton opting out, health issues, 31. They're in win mode now, right? Win now mode, pardon me. You've got Boston. You've got other teams that are starting to creep up. Miami, who knows if they can actually get a legit guard, right? And try to make that work. So I think the Sixers are going to be hard pressed. I can see them winning their 48 to 52, 53 games, and then getting
Yep.
bounced in the second round. And then you'll have some of the clowns and some of the horrible takes about the process that it failed miserably. It hasn't worked out. You can connect the dots the way you want to connect the dots. You can make sense of it because if it fits your narrative. But the bottom line is this has and is a losing franchise. And if
Yeah.
you look at all the GM shuffle that they've had over the last several years, that kind of tells you what kind of environment, what kind of culture that basically they were dealing with. And after a while, whether the players decide we don't want to deal with it, it's their fault to some extent because you're not performing on the floor. The head coach is the GM. I get it. But it's just a goofy dynamic, man. For years, all you heard was you don't want to be an NBA purgatory, which is sixth,
Mm-hmm.
seventh, eighth seed, right? But
Right.
this is pretty much, in essence, where they're at and where they're going to be without putting that 6, 7, or 8 seed next to them, meaning they'll get to the playoffs, they might win around, but they're not going to go any farther.
Yeah, they're in the purgatory 3 to 5 range, where, like you said, depending on their draw, they'll get past the first round, but that second round, bugaboo it's still there. It still lingers for them. It's why Sixers fans don't really tune into the regular season, right? Because you already know how the story's going to go. You
First,
already know, like, gets to the second round, you kind of know what's potentially going to happen. Now, maybe does Nick Nurse change that? Oh, you hope, right? You hope that he comes in. You think he has an actual system, which Doc Rivers seemed like he didn't. You hope that he can change the culture. But however, and you mentioned it, right? If they were to lose in the second round again next season, who does the blame fall on then? Because you can't
but that's the thing,
say
you don't have the
it's the
coach. You
head,
fired the
right?
coach.
Right. You can't say the coach. And as crazy as it sounds, the blame, because there won't be no Harden in the way. You ain't going to blame Maxey. The blame's going to fall on the, sad to say, the big guy who was the league MVP.
It is classic Monday morning quarterbacking ultimately, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
push for certain players, then when you get them and it doesn't work out, there's a side that'll sit there and say, see, this is why. Look, I never was enamored with Harden. You know that. Everyone knows that. He's never
Yeah.
been a clutch player. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. We know
Oh,
that.
yeah.
He's a prolific scorer, but ultimately, game on the line, he doesn't want the shot. And then you have another player in Embiid where, again, it might rub people the wrong way. You want to give him the MVP this year. I don't have a problem with it, but we know who the MVP is. We know who the best player in the league is. Question is now, do you rip it down? Do you even contemplate trading Embiid because he's getting older? He's been in the league, what now, 6, 7 is going to be his 8th year. I mean,
Yeah,
so
probably.
logging minutes, right? Injury
Mm-hmm.
prone. You bring in a head coach that what? He wants guys to play all the time. I mean, can you imagine if you're looking at futures for Embiid, if you think he's going to play over 65? I'm grabbing the under right now and I'm running with it because Nurse is going to run these guys into the ground. So I think they're in a very precarious position because he might have that type of career where, great player, maybe fringe as a Hall of Famer, MVP, very good player, 48 to 52, 53 wins here and there, but still no Eastern Conference Finals, no NBA
Yeah.
Finals appearance. It looks
And
like it's
that's
a disappointment.
Yeah, no, and that defines, as you get better as a player, you start going up those ranks, and you become an all-star, then you start winning those awards like an MVP, the stakes rise, right? The pressure rises now when the expectations get higher. And like you said, do you think about tearing it down right now? No. But if you do somehow, again, get bounced in the second round, you might have to have that discussion of saying, well, this team has maxed out everything that they have done throughout these years in the Joel Embiid era. And the only player that would have been a constant through all those is Joel Embiid. So you would have to do that tough look in the mirror. And like I've told people all the time, and I say it consistently. I don't believe there's no untouchable in the NBA, because if Kevin Durant can get moved and he's a Hall of Famer and, one of the top 10, players and blah, 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 then anybody can get moved.
I'll do you one better. I mean, think about it just in our backyard, right? In the Philadelphia market, for argument's sake. Everyone screamed there's absolutely no friggin' way that Donovan McNabb will ever get traded. There's no way
traded.
Carson Wentz will ever get traded. There's no way
traded.
we'll get rid of Allen. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So you're right. There are a select few, maybe 2 or 3 in all of sport. And again, even some of those select few at times have moved on, some to greener pastures, and some it turns out to be worse off. All right, let's switch gears for a couple moments. I want to get your thoughts on, we'll sprinkle in a little baseball, but then I want to hit the NFL with the news today with the players, with the gambling probe and whatnot, and the suspensions. But baseball now, you look at the NFC, you look at the NL East, right? And look, I mean, the Mets have just flat out imploded. This is a team that won 101 games last year, and they've had all these injuries. Cohen's tossed some money. It hasn't worked out with these hurlers. Alonso got hurt. They're inconsistent. They're blowing leads. I mean, it's a mess. And I know Buck is kind of on notice, so to speak, but I think they'll give him one more year. You have the Phillies that are still a little bit of an enigma, right? We can talk about the shuffling of the lineups, the inability to manufacture runs and hit in certain spots. They won 3 straight. I think they're 7-3 in their last 10. Nobody's catching the Atlanta Braves. But second half of the season, do you believe the Phillies will be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline?
I think that the Phillies will be buyers. I think with the way that they've kind of navigated the schedule, and you have to think, Castellanos is playing at an all-star level. You have to believe, right, that Trey Turner will somehow figure it out, hopefully. And you would think Bryce Harper will get back in rhythm after coming back, 160 days, after Tommy John surgery. So you have to think that they'll turn it around. And you have to think, the rotation, more so Aaron Nola, right? That's the one that's kind of falling on his face right now in the rotation, because Taijuan Walker's turned it around. Willer's been doing Willer things. Suarez, Nola has turned around. But I think by the time we get to the deadline, I definitely think there will be buyers. I think that's just number one. That's Dave Dombrowski and John Middleton. I think that's just their MO, right? They just want to consistently be in, competition, and consistently want to be, to be the best team that they can be. And, hopefully they can, try to get a 5th starter, because that's kind of been beleaguered in them right now. Even though Christopher Sanchez is giving them a shot in the arm, you still need a solid 5, which they surprisingly went out last year and got Syndergaard. Yep. So maybe they can do it. But right now, I definitely think they're going to be buyers, just because I don't know if the Marlins are going to keep on playing at the level that they're playing, which is kind of crazy, because Alcantara is not having the greatest of seasons, but they're getting
crazy. He's pitching poorly.
Right. And they're above 500, but they're getting unexpected contributions from like the Braxton Garretts of the world, and the rookie phenom Yui Perez, who's been tremendous for them. And then offensively, they don't put up a lot of runs, but when they do, they put them in bunches. Yeah. So I definitely think
they got a stud who's going to contend for 400 too.
Luis Arias is,
which I think, by the way, not to cut you off, but Baltimore, the Arizona Diamondbacks were one of my dark horses to win a stacked NL West. But Baltimore's a great story. But that kid from Miami, that's got to be one of the top storylines, because you're thinking about those years. Remember when Dykstra early on, they called him Batman? He was batting close to 400. Brett, Gwynn, Carew. I mean, this is, I think, Castillo years ago with the Marlins as well. I mean, this is going to be an interesting run to see what happens. I think they have sustainability because they do have pitching, and they can beat the Mets and the Phillies, and they've shown they can beat the Braves. So
Right. And that's all
they're
you
going to
got to
contend. Yeah, at
Yeah,
least
and
for a
that's all
while.
you got to do.
Yeah,
Right. And I think with the way that the schedules kind of fell with, everybody playing all these different teams, so you don't have a lot of division games, that's a quick way to stack up some wins on some bad teams that you might
100%.
come across though, instead of all right, it's August and September and we're playing like 12 divisional games in a row where you could lose ground or even gain ground.
Yeah. And it's again, very interesting point you bring up. You paid a lot of money for Turner, right? And you
Mhm.
want, I mean, look, I'm pulling up his numbers right now. 325 at bats, 45 runs, 90 hits, 16 doubles. The power numbers, they are what they are. I mean, look, he cracked 21 last year. He's right around the 18 to 20 on average, seasonal average. The RBIs is what's alarming. I mean, he's only 29 ribbies, right? And he had 100 last year, and the batting average stinks, right? So 246 to 298. Now, I'm wondering too, some of these really good hitters that we've seen over the years in baseball. I'm also wondering if this also has to do with the pitch clock and getting these pitches in bang, 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 and maybe throwing off some of their rhythm here and there at the plate. But listen, he's hitting in a hitter friendly ballpark,
Yeah.
but he's not putting up the numbers that you would want him or expect him to put up for the money that you're paying him, right? That's how we kind of it's the
Right.
Tobias Harris thing, right? We're paying you this,
Yeah.
give me that production.
Yeah, it's crazy, like you said, and especially when we even just look at how he performed in the World Baseball Classic, right? It's the ball was jumping off the bat, he's hitting, grand slams, and you're thinking that momentum's going to carry itself over, and it haven't. And like you said, you play in a hitter friendly park where you necessarily don't have to drive the ball out the ballpark. With his speed, he should be getting doubles and triples like it's nobody's business, but it hasn't clicked for him yet. It's almost weirdly how it didn't click for Nick Castellanos his first year in with
Yep.
the Phillies. Like he was a little bit off balance at the plate, and just we saw it in the World Series, right? He was swinging at any and everything, trying to get on base. And with Turner, you don't think he would have those struggles just because we saw what he's been his entire career, and even just in his career at the month of June, which I thought personally, like, all right, the calendar turns to June. He's a 300 hitter in June. Like this is gonna be the turnaround for him, and it just haven't, got there
No.
for him yet. And honestly, most of this might be a weird conspiracy, but like most of those guys that played on that World Baseball Classic team haven't played well either.
Listen, it's derailed the Mets season,
Yeah.
right?
And the
Losing
pitch and the
Diaz.
pit and the pitchers, right? The pitchers that was on Team USA haven't looked good.
Baseball is so funny, right? Because even from an odd standpoint or a gambling or betting standpoint, right? Everyone's like, you play the streaks, and all of a sudden you jump on Cincinnati 4 or 5 in, and okay, they run it to 12. You look at Oakland, they're a horrible team. The Yankees are going to beat them, but Domingo pitches poorly his last 2 outings, and then what does he do? He has a
A
brilliant
perfect
99.
right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's such a goofy sport. I mean, Kansas City's bad. Oakland is bad. But if you look at, for instance, Washington, look at Washington's record against the spread. It's unbelievable, but they
Yeah.
stink. It's
It's
just it's
it's
it's such a weird. And by the way, they beat the Mariners today 4-1. Or I'm sorry, that was yesterday. So they covered again in a game outright, right? Plus on the money line. So it's just they're not a good team, but yet if you're betting them, X amount of units, they're profitable for you, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, no, and I think that's the most important thing, when you just talk about betting, baseball, it's such a game of just marathons and sprints. And like you said, we can go, off all the numbers that we want. We can look at all the splits and ERAs
Yep,
and all
yep,
these stats, and it tells us one thing, right? Like you said, the Nationals not great team, right? But somehow, some way, they always find a way to cover to keep it
yeah,
within, that 1.5. Even though they don't have the greatest of pitchers, you
right.
probably can't name a bunch of guys in that lineup outside of Lane Thomas.
That's
but
the
they
only
find
player. I think he's got over 10 home runs. Everyone else doesn't.
yeah, that's the crazy part. But they're still able to
Yeah.
pull it together. And even like you say, Domingo Herman, I don't think nobody saw him going for no perfect game because we just know just him as a type of pitcher where he's last couple of years just been getting rocked. And
Yep.
like you said, his last two starts, I know me personally, I was like, all right. I looked at his numbers. I'm like, he's giving up a couple of bombs tonight. I know Oakland's bad, but just doesn't have it. And then, like you said, he goes perfect game
Yep.
with 9 strikeouts.
Yeah. In front of 12,000 fans, by the way. Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, listen, for teams like Washington or even at times Kansas City or Oakland, you're going to win some games here and there. So all of a sudden I see plus 236, 245. I'm like, let me look at these pitching matchups a little more
Right.
Mm-hmm.
closer. Jovan Alford at Jovan 10 content producer, Sporting News, and now doing some content with FTN Bet. So give them a follow as well. Also, still has the pod out there too. It does a great job. TotalSportsLive.com. All right. NFL. I mean, again, I hate to just belabor the point, but I love how people are just so like shocked. Oh my God, let's suspend 4 players for gambling violations. And by the way, 2 of them just got released from the Colts. So they kind of
Yeah.
wash their hands of that. But this is 20 years in the making, 25 years in the making. Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, the hypocrisy of the NFL to try to be high and mighty and sit right perched up on the porch from the soapbox, and we're not going to tolerate X, Y, and Z when it comes to gambling. But yet, every freaking time you're watching a pregame show, a halftime show, a postgame show, a weekly show,
Yep.
you listen to radio, you're watching the networks. All-time great broadcasters like Michaels are sitting there saying, "Well, somebody's going to be ticked off in New York tomorrow," because they're talking about what? The line.
Betting. Right.
They're talking betting and gambling. I mean, enough is enough, man. So I guess this doesn't really surprise me, but what's going to happen when a marquee, a prominent player in the NFL, and you hate to throw out a name per se, but what if it is a quarterback like a Burrow or a Mahomes or an Aaron Rodgers or insert wide receiver, running back, quarterback,
Right.
prominent, marquee, face of the league or faces of the league, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
face of the franchise, that they get pinched and there's an investigation being done on them for gambling or sports betting. Then what happens?
I think the NFL would probably do what they've been doing, which is give him that nice year of suspension. I think we saw it right with Calvin Ridley, even though he's not a marquee, player per se, but he was one of the more rising wide receivers in the league. And we saw that they, laid down the hammer, fairly quickly and mighty, which, a lot of people have stances on, well, you're a little bit harder on gambling than you are on other issues that the NFL are hammering on. So yeah, it's like you said, it's very hypocritical because the league is getting, like you said, the league's getting money off of betting. Like you said, you can't you could watch the Red Zone channel and they'll tell you like before the Sunday night game, Red Zone channel will tell you like here's our parlay, here's our DraftKings same game parlay with our promo code such and such, such and such. So it's like they're throwing it out at you, and you don't think that these guys are going to do it because number one, they're human, and number two, they're sports fans. Like they're going to do it. Now, the rules, I think, was kind of throwing the players off, which is kind of odd, but it just showed that the league is probably not being transparent enough where these guys are getting hit for, hey, I was gambling, but I wasn't gambling on the NFL, but I was gambling on the team facilities in the team facility, so I'm getting hit for that. Like it's
But
just
now what happens when the friends of the player, like for instance, friends of Rodgers who are in Florida, and everyone knows legal sports betting is not available in Florida, right? Because of Seminole.
That's worse.
Correct. So the largest wager placed was $1,000 prop bet on the over under on rushing yards. Oh, by the way, by a Colts running back, which won, but the majority of the bets were $25 to $50. Now, listen, if I hold, put a gun and rob some poor schmo on the street, doesn't matter if I stole $5 from him or 500. No,
No.
I still had a weapon and I still armed
Right.
robbery and I still held them up. So I don't know if there's no wiggle room with this. You're right. You can't be a little pregnant, but I laugh because why does the NFL have the injury report. I
Yeah,
mean, it's common knowledge. The injury
right.
report is for who? It's not for the league or the
It's
players.
for the fans.
It's
For
for
the
the
fans that are
gambling
it's,
public. It's
yeah,
for the
it's for the
betting public.
gambling,
Yeah.
fantasy,
So
things all like that.
imagine if you eliminate that. Imagine if the NFL just decided, no updates Wednesday, Thursday, because then you see what the movement on the lines. I guess
Yeah.
my point is they want to sit there and say we're not in bed with this, but if you piece certain things together, they are in bed with it. So then when the player turns around or their friends turn around or family members, a player will never you know this. If there's Giants are playing the Eagles and all of a sudden it's Eagles are favored by 6 and there's 3, 4, 5 million late on that game, the line's going to move and it's going to
Oh,
move
completely.
substantially. The only
Yes.
time the line really legitimately moves substantially without the sharps is if there's an injury to a marquee player, i.e., the
Yep.
running back. So, point being, I don't believe a player is going to sit there and say, yo, man, put a $5 million bet on the under on this game because they will know. People will know there's too many red flags. You can't do it with the app, the paper trail, everything. So I guess the point is, would they even consider we'll allow you to gamble, but you just
Hmm.
can't bet on football games? But even then, how do I prevent you who's playing for the Eagles to tell your friends, yo, man, do me a favor. Jalen's kind of nicked up this week. So,
Right, right. And that I think that's so hard,
right?
right? And that's where you get into the gray area. Because like you said, you can say, hey, no NFL players, you guys can sports bet, you can bet on basketball, baseball, hockey, whatever you want to bet on, but you can't bet on the NFL. But like you said, what's stopping somebody saying, like you said, yo, Jalen Hurts looking a little nicked up. He might not play. I'm just going to tell my cousin,
Wink, wink.
who's
I'm having a
right,
barbecue with the family on a Saturday. We got the game on Monday night. Oh, what's going on with Hurts, man? He's walking. Oh, hold on a second.
right.
Oh,
Let me just
rushing prop,
let me
125 yards. Let me hit the under. Like,
right.
I don't know, man. It's you can talk about it all day long, but the bottom line is the NFL is already in bed, and they got in bed once they moved the Raiders to Vegas, and they
Oh
got in
yeah.
bed much more earlier than that. Um, it it's just funny, man. I mean, as much as you love the red zone, that's a gambler's dream too.
Oh yeah, because you don't have to watch the game. I mean, Sunday ticket is just as bad, like because you have all these things at your fingertips and you already know people are watching the red zone because they're following, their fantasy team, right? Because at the
Yeah,
bottom of the ticker, they're showing you fantasy scores or they're showing you this is the line coming up for this game. Like we see it in everywhere, right? We see it on every sports
100%.
channel. There's always a ticker that says live odds presented to you by, and you'll see the minus or the -4.5, the +7. Like it's all there, for all of us. And like you said, these leagues are going to have NFL specifically is going to do a figure it out because we're not seeing or we're not hearing about it, right? We're not hearing about it in the NBA and the
Yeah.
NF and the NHL,
But you had the
MLB, but
Donaghy, right? The Donaghy with,
oh yeah, with
you
the
know,
NBA, yeah. And
yeah,
then we've had people, bring up the controversies, talking about the sham stuff last week with the NBA draft and how the lines were moving, with that, with him reporting one thing and he's worked affiliated with a sports book. So yeah, it's all a nasty
there,
gray area.
yeah,
And
and I remember as a kid, and I always remember my father used to explain this to me when the NFL today, the original great NFL today on CBS, when Musburger and the gang, Jimmy the Greek was a handicapper. He was an odds maker. But if you go back and you go to YouTube and you Google some of the old school ones where
Mhm.
they're getting ready, kick off and the Meadowlands, Giants and Dallas or Giants and the Eagles, and Jimmy the Greek would never sit there and say Eagles by 7. He would say, I think the Eagles are a touchdown or more favorite. That was the wink, wink.
Right.
And I remember
The,
my
the
father
the
used to
code the
always,
coded link the
yeah,
coded
he would always
language. There you
explain it
go.
to me. There's a reasoning behind that, son, right? There's a
Hmm.
reasoning why they word it like that. And then as you get older and you really start to understand, I mean, it was the brilliant foresight back in the day to see that. But the irony is it's kind of come all full circle now, because years ago it was taboo. Now we want to cram it down your throat. Why? Because we want you to download the app and gamble.
Yeah, we want you to put in those promo codes.
Like,
Even the
come
same thing
on,
with
man.
fantasy, right? Remember, fantasy wasn't such, it was
Yeah.
kind of taboo too, right? But
Romo
now
got in
it's,
trouble.
yeah. And now, Austin Eckler's like prominently, involved in fantasy football, and it's blown up now to where, the leagues are promoting it. There's shows
Yep.
behind it. We have DFS dealing with, DFS is low key dealing with the best of both worlds, right?
Yep.
You're dealing with fantasy, you're dealing with betting, you're
Yep.
dealing with money.
Yep.
So it's such a great area. And you hope you would thought players would have learned after the Calvin Ridley situation, but obviously they
No.
didn't. And they haven't learned, and you hope then. And I don't think they're going to learn after Isaiah Rodgers and him putting $1,000 bet on an over under, which I'm pretty sure that wasn't on Jonathan Taylor. It probably had to be on Deion Jackson. Just saying. Like,
Hey, real quick before I let you out of here. So our guy, Vin the Insider on Twitter, who's hit on some things in the past. We're not going to say the most, I don't like to say reliable, but interesting. If you follow him, I know he's had some beef with other media guys. He just, tweeted out Sixers, Clippers trade that would send Tobias Harris and Harden to LA. I'm told the trade scenarios involve Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. Now, again, he was right on Harper. He was right on Wentz. He was right on Harden. Okay, fine. But let's just say, for instance, he didn't tweet that out, and it's just out there, speculation. Would you say pull the trigger on that deal?
or the trigger on it. I would, if we're not talking Kawhi. If it's Paul George, then I would. Because I trust Paul George to be a little bit more healthy than Kawhi Leonard. And Paul George's injuries have more so been like his shoulder,
Yeah.
and not dealing with the Achilles or the MCLs and the ACLs and the meniscuses. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm even seeing something from Jake Fisher even reporting, similar, saying that the Sixers and Clippers have been contacted in this week for Los Angeles among wide-ranging talks on Marcus Morris and Norman Powell have approached Philadelphia on separate trade ideas for James Harden and Tobias Harris. I mean,
well, hey, have fun.
I hate to be I hate to be Daryl Morey right now. Just
yeah, right. Well, have fun with Paul George in the fourth quarter when he doesn't shoot like James Harden.
But will Paul George go through the free throw line flailing looking for a call?
No, because he's not going to put the ball on the floor.
James
Harden can't even elevate, right?
Yeah, no, that's the fact. That's on that. I think watching that Celtics series, that was the saddest part. Like after he had the 40-point games, he would not be able to get lift on none of his shots or go into the layup.
No, he was done for the summer. He was already thinking about golfing and vacation plans after that, man. That was his one. Let me turn back the clock and shut people up. Other than that, I'm freaking shutting it down for the
Had two of them. Had two of those type of games, which is incredible.
I mean, this was like watching guys like miss tackles in December, business decisions, man. You know what I'm saying? Asante Samuel, I'm not wrapping you up. Right? I got a cruise coming up in early January. We're making business decisions on that. All right, Jovan Alford at Jovan10. All right, so again, you're going to be tweeting out some picks and whatnot, some new content for FTN bets. So what do you got cooking with that? I already see you're tweeting out some stuff.
Yeah, so FTN right now knocking out some college football stuff. Heisman odds post is already up. Looking at obviously Caleb Williams being the favorite, but also also wrote about some players to keep an eye out for in that race. The Cade Klubniks, the Jayden Daniels of the world, for the Heisman Trophy. And next up, Big Ten preview. So be on the lookout for that this weekend, and then the rest of the month for FTN. Just be on the lookout for more college previews. We're almost there. So it's almost college football season, which means we're almost at NFL season and the cycle begins.
Unbelievable. And I get to sit back and watch Saquon sit down and Daniel Jones throw for 1,800 total friggin' yards this year and 18 touchdowns and 4 picks. So I'm looking forward to that with the Giants.
Hey, you never know. It might be 2,000 with Darren Waller. Just saying.
No, I'm not. Listen, I enjoyed last season. I'm good for a couple more years. Even though I'll still be pissed when they get blown out by the Eagles like they always do. But hey, always good to get you back on. We'll keep doing it. We got a lot of stuff. I want to start to get into the NFL with you as well. And we'll start to look at some of these divisions and some futures and some good player props as well. But always appreciate it, pal. Congrats on the new venture, and we'll talk next week.
Hey, for sure.